Smile. um, 2018, Grandad.
2018, yeah.
When were you born?
1931. Yeah. It's a long, long time ago now. I wonder sometimes where, what have I done with my life?
Well, we can answer that question soon.
Yeah. So?
Let's start with your parents and your grandparents. Do you remember your grandparents?
I only remember my grandmother. There was a bit of a if in the family, with my grandparents. It was before my time, before I was born, and he was jealous of her, and he hit her over the head with a hammer.
Your granddad?
My granddad.
Hit your grandmother.
So he went to jail for a 12-month. And then when he come home, of course he had 12 children, my grandmother, because I ended up with 22 grandchildren they had. And I didn't find this out until only recently about my grandmother and father. And so what happened was that they threw him out. We come back over from jail, wanted to go home, and his sons threw him out. But one of the daughters took him in, and my mother and father would see him every so often, every 6 months or so, like.
Was he your father or your mother's?
My mother and father, but this is my mother's side.
Your mother's side, yeah.
Yeah. And every time we went down to see them, I was 12, 13, 14. I was always told, don't tell anybody else that you've been down here to see you, But I only seen her about once or twice. And that was it, really.
Do you remember him particularly?
No, I wouldn't say no. I knew my grandmother more. Because you can imagine, there was a family of the boys, and some of the, my daughter, I can't mean my, uncle and aunties.
Right.
And they lived next door to us. We lived at number 24. They lived at number 22 next door. And the Christmases and New Year's and things like this time of the year, it was all, booze and laughs, and Uncle George had to get up and say his little bit, and somebody else had to say his little bit, and it was great. Yeah.
Good memories.
We don't normally do speeches at Christmas.
No, we don't.
Maybe you should do one this year, Grandad. A speech at Christmas.
Yeah, but so my life really as a child, I had a very good life.
And you're on your dad's side, your
Yeah.
father's side. Did you meet the grandparents that side or not?
No, I didn't. No.
Do you know anything about them?
No, not at all.
Nothing.
I know they were very poor,
Mm-hmm.
because my father said once about, brown paper next to your skin if you were ever out in the cold. And they would, as a family, they would join the church every winter, because the church was the only organisation that would give blankets to these people, to, the families. And that was it. Then he would give the blankets back come the spring.
Were they very religious or not at all?
No.
They just couldn't afford.
I wouldn't have said they were, no. And I'm not religious either. You know.
And do you know, so the grandparents you did know, your granddad who hit your grandmother over the head with a hammer, what did he do for a living before then, before he went to jail?
He was a tinsmith, I think, or something like that. But that is about,
Yeah.
That is about all I know about him, really.
Mm.
Yeah.
And your parents then? So
Yeah.
your dad, what do you know about your dad?
Well, I wish now I had been doing something like this with my father, because in the First World War, he was a CO, a conscientious objector. Now, I can never understand why he was a CO, because in that era, people would join when the war come about. They joined the war because they thought it was only going to last for a few years. Even going to finish at Christmas, and they were going to get the money from the army,
Mm-hmm.
because there's always a lot of unemployment around in those days, and well, there we are. What can I say? Yeah.
Did he ever talk to you about being a conscientious objector?
No. But I knew one of his friends who was in prison with him. He was down in Dartmoor.
He went to prison for being a conscientious objector?
Yes, yeah. And he was in Warwick prison, I think, and he was also in Dartmoor prison. But they ran the prison on their own. He wasn't locked up in a cell or things like this.
Okay.
The bunch of them got together in the prison, and they got food given to them, and so they looked after themselves. They cooked for themselves and things like that. One thing happened in the prison, funny enough, was that they had too much fish. Now, people outside were starving almost because of the war, and there was boats being torpedoed by the Germans, so they couldn't, and there was no rationing in those days, not like we did in the Second World War. So it's a bit, if you had money, you could buy the food. If you didn't, you starved. And they had a committee in the prison, and they petitioned the governor of the prison. They said, look, there's too much food, there's too much fish, it should be given to people outside. And they ignored them. They still carried on. And so they got fish, and somebody climbed up in the tower and tied it to the clock in the prison. Fish, and they put fish in letterboxes in the prison, where it was going to be most. It was annoying.
As a protest.
The prison, yes.
It would smell?
Yeah.
Yeah. As a
Yeah.
protest, wow.
But,
And did anything come of that?
no. My mother went down to see him. I don't know how many times. And of course, they didn't have. When the war started, they were volunteers. We're talking about First World War, of course.
Mm-hmm.
They had volunteers, and there was people who were so poor that some of people going in the army, they wouldn't accept them because of they were underweight and and things like this. It was a very bad time in this country.
How long was he in prison for? Was it until the end of the war?
Yes, yeah.
Wow, so 4 years or?
Well, no,
Why?
they didn't. It wasn't compulsory until 1917.
Until 1970.
Yeah, and the war finished in 1918. Look, So it wasn't all that long, really. And that was it. And when he come out, he didn't go back to the work. He when he went in prison, he was working for Steelworks down in Bristol somewhere, and they what were they? They were covering metal. You know when you cover metal and it don't rust.
Galvanise.
That's right. They were the first company to start galvanizing metal.
Wow.
And at one time, when he worked before the war, he earned £20 a week. Now that was a fantastic, you know, when
Wow.
people earn £1 a week.
Wow.
But because of the overtime and all this, and the firm he was working for, I don't know the name of it, but they were going to go to Australia. And that was it. I suppose they didn't, you know, that was about all I knew. And then he become then a baker's roundsman. And he worked for the co-op.
What's a baker's roundsman? Is that someone who
Deliver
delivers
bread.
it? Okay. Yeah.
He started off with a horse and cart,
Yeah.
and he used to come home. Now I'm now 13 or 14, 15, something like that. And he used to come around our district, you know, where I used to live at Easton. And the horse and the wagon was outside. And he had this horse that would not sleep in the stables at night. And what happened was that my father would be in the middle of his dinner, and you hear knock at the door. It was Mr. Isaacs, your horse is on the ground. And of course, the horse went to sleep outside in the road in the rain, so we had to go out there, uncover the blooming horse, and get him to stand up again. So that was just one.
Why? I'm a bit lost there. Why does the horse need to stand up to sleep? Why isn't it allowed to lie on the road? It was in the middle of the road.
He wouldn't sleep when he went back to the stables.
Oh, if you let him sleep then.
Oh, when he took him back to the stables, he wouldn't sleep.
Right.
He wouldn't, you know, he had difficulty sleeping. So he was tired in the daytime.
I see.
Yeah. There we are. And then I went out with my father one Christmas. Now the hours he spent was, he would be 12 o'clock coming home Christmas Eve. You know, he would be
Midnight?
finishing.
Midnight or
Wow.
Yeah.
Blimey.
And
And
he
what
used
time
to
had he started
ride
in the
his
morning?
bike. He would start quite early, it would be 8, 9, something like this. And I went around with him once, and I realised what kind of job he had. He would know Mrs. Smith up the road. She had two. Somebody else had, and he knew exactly. He'd put him in the basket, and then I would help him, go up and down. And the horse, of course, would follow him up the road, because the horse knew exactly where he was going. And then somebody decided to do away with horses and carts, have a Dodgem. Now a Dodgem is an electric car.
Like a milk float.
That's right. Just exactly the same, but carrying bread. And of course, my father didn't like this at all, because
Didn't follow him.
didn't follow him. He had to go right back, get in there, and off he went.
Yeah.
But
That's
that was
interesting.
it.
And your mother, did she work at all? Did you say that she? Oh no, it was your grandmother on your mother's side that had 10 children.
12, yeah.
12 children.
Yeah.
And your mother had.
She had 4 boys. There was Jack, the eldest, Ken, myself, and Raymond. Now, when the war, we're back to the Second World War now. My father always said that we should have a trade. If we had a trade, like we could do anything else in the world with a trade.
Like being a plumber or electrician or something.
That's right. So my eldest brother was a sign writer. Now you don't see them today because of, you can
Printing.
buy it and stick it and all that. He's the guy with the long brush,
Wow.
and he would write
With that Jack, sorry.
Jack,
Jack, yeah.
Mr.
Jack.
and Mrs. or whatever you wanted. He would do the vans or whatever you wanted.
You must like his
As a-
handwriting.
as a sign writer. And then Ken, my other brother, he was stonemason, and he got killed on his bike coming home from work, and that was in November. And they were building shelters because they knew that the war was relevant. Second World War was relevant, and the foreman of the where he was building shelters told him he could go home early. It's not a bad, it's a miserable night. So that's what happened.
He was on a push bike.
Yeah, push bike went one way, he went the other way, and it was a rainy night, and people moved him from the road onto the pavement, and he had a lung, a bone in his
Punctured
Punctured
lung.
yeah,
lung.
a punctured lung. By moving him in, and that's what happened, and that was it.
How old was he?
He was 14 at the time.
And he was already working as a stonemason at
Mm.
14 years old.
Yeah. But mine, I left school at 14 myself. When I left school, the government of the day said that people should leave school at 15. It was brought up, people used to go many, many years ago, look, kids would up the chimney and things like this, And then I wanted to be, he wanted me to be a stonemason.
Who wanted you to be?
My father. I said, no, I'd like to be a plumber. So he took me to the gas company, thinking that the gas company would be in a plumbing line, but it's the two different entities, really. There's a difference in plumbing and gas fitting. So anyway, they took me on, as at 14, and I become apprenticed at 16. And
Does that mean you started your apprenticeship when you were 16?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. But I started work for the gas company, and it was before they were nationalised. 14 look.
So it was a private company then?
Oh yeah. And my other brother Raymond, and he's 6 years younger than I am. He was a carpenter. So we had really,
Good set of skills then.
quite a thing really. And of course it worked out very well for me to be a gas fitter. I did feel as though I wanted to do some plumbing, so I used to go at night and go plumbing, joined, I was going to say, what could I?
Was it a night school or?
It was a night school, yeah. And I learned, just went learning plumbing. I didn't do the theory bit, but I done the practical. How to wipe a joint and things like this. How to knock a lead tile up. But that also come in the gas fitting line as well, And that was it, really.
So your mother had 4 boys,
Yeah.
and presumably she didn't work herself?
Yeah, she
was
did.
So she did work.
Yeah, I can I can't remember much about Raymond, my younger brother, because he's all on to me now about what happened, you know, when we were growing up, and I really can't really remember him because there was quite a difference in our ages in between, you know. And my mother started. She took me to nursery school, and she went then on to work, and she used to work for a woman cleaning the house, and then she worked for my uncle that was the manager of a tailor's shop in the middle of Bristol, up in Park Street, and she used to go there and dust around and clean up the place there, you know. And then she would pick me up on the way home from nursery, and that was it.
Do you remember what your mother and father were like when you were growing up?
And what do you mean by what they were like?
How were they as people? Were they funny, serious, friendly, loud, quiet?
Quiet people, really. Yeah, my father never drank. I think he used to drink it one time, because one time he come home from work when I was very young on his bike drunk, you know, and he put his arm around me and they had a row, you know. Don't do, what's that child, and all this, you know, talking about me, and that was it. But normally I could say anything to my mother and father, and it was a very liberal upbringing. Yeah, I would talk politics to my mother, and because they were very political, really, you know. But yes, it was I could look back on my life as growing up as a child. Good, very good.
And did your parents agree politically? Did they argue a lot, or were they always?
No, they agreed politically.
And what
yeah.
were their views?
They were socialists. And I've been a socialist all my life. And if I become a millionaire tomorrow, I'd still be a socialist. And that was it.
Do you remember Ken?
No, I don't.
How much older than you was Ken?
There was about 6 years difference, I think, in Ken. Yeah. No, because Jack, he joined he was caught up in the war.
The Second World War.
The latter part of the war, as an SBA.
What's that?
Sick birth attendant.
Sick birth.
Sick birth attendant, like a nurse on board a boat.
Right.
He wasn't a doctor, but he was in charge of injuries and people and things like this on board.
How come he got that job then? Was he doing something medically relevant?
No, he was. I don't know how he got the job really, but he was a member of the Boys Brigade, and he was an officer. He ended up as an officer, and I think he picked it up from there really. You know, learning bits and pieces about medicine and things like this, and that's it. He was very lucky at one time because he had what they call a draft, and they had a draft up to a certain number, and he was the last one. He wanted, and they were going to South Africa. This is in the war now, and he was stationed at Portsmouth, yeah, and also outside of Bristol, which is a mental home now, and he was in the Navy there as an SBA, and the draft went to South Africa. He wanted to go, but it stopped at his name. You know.
So he never
That
got
was
to go.
it. Sorry.
He never got to go.
No, he didn't. And the boat that went with these people got torpedoed, and they all drowned. He went to America to pick up a boat in the Pacific, and he went on one of the Queens, either the Queen Mary or the Queen Elizabeth, because those were the boats that could go faster than a submarine. They could
Outrun them.
outrun them, and nobody knew where they were going, you know. So that was it. And he went to America and crossed Canada by train and picked up a destroyer, and that was it.
Must have been in a team of people picking
Yeah.
up the.
Oh, he wasn't the
Yeah.
only one. Oh,
yeah.
The ship was it was English people had to. The ship was being made in Canada for England.
It's a brand new ship. I see.
Oh,
So
yeah.
picking it up for the war
You
effort
would
and bring
pick
it
it up.
back.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that it could be used. I see.
Because in the war they had there was a lot of ships being made by the Americans. Now we couldn't make ships fast enough. Ships were being sunk by, you heard of convoys and things like this with submarines. But the Americans, when they make their boats, they welded. When we made our boats, it was
Bolt.
rivets.
Oh, pot rivet. Yeah.
Somebody had to heat the rivet up, throw it up, it caught it and knocked it into the hole, and this all took time. This is why
Jeez.
the Americans could build more boats. And of course we had a lease lend then in the war.
A what? Sorry.
Lease lend. We lent the boats and we had to pay them back later on. And so this is, in the end, we were a country after the Second World War, down on our knees really, And luckily we had a socialist government get in for the first time ever. We had a socialist government in before the war, but they didn't have enough people to work it. It's similar to what we got now. We got the Tories in, but they got to have somebody else supporting them. The
DUP.
yeah. And this is what happened before the war. And of course, Winston Churchill, he really thought that he was going to form a government because he's the right old Tory, and that was it. And but they got him with about 150 majority in Parliament. But we were bankrupt as a country, and at the time we wanted to form National Health. Churchill said we couldn't afford it. Beaverbrook, who was in charge of newspapers, some of the newspapers in this country, said the same thing. And but the government of the day, which was a socialist government, done it, and there we are. And I can remember the fights not fights, that's
Protests.
but people, doctors, trying to get them on board, and surgeons and things like this. And the only way that they could get them on board was to give way to them and said, look, if you join the National Health, you can do private work on your own, and because the money.
Yeah.
And they thought by joining the National Health they were going to lose money, and there was a fight, but they went out in the end.
Of course, there was a great many other things around the early 50s, like milk in schools and
Oh,
other
yes.
welfare state things didn't exist before.
No,
It was part of that government.
no, yeah. So I think we've got a lot to thank ourselves for, really.
Mm. So you mentioned that Jack was in the Boys Brigade.
Mm-hmm.
Was he not in the Woodcraft folk at all?
No, no.
Because you and Raymond certainly were, right?
Well, yes, I was in the Woodcraft Folk because my brother, who died, Ken, who got killed, his shirt was always hung up in the wardrobe. It wasn't a shirt, we called it a costume. And it was a green shirt with tassels around the bottom. And they called it, I didn't know this at the time, but they called it a costume because they, and really enjoyed it. It was a breakaway, the Woodcraft was a breakaway from the Scouts. This is why they were formed. They felt that the Scouts were formed by the Boer War. You know, the guy in the Boer War, can't think of his name. Who was in charge?
No, I can't help you with that.
No. Baden Powell. Baden Powell.
Okay.
And there were
He created
the Scouts.
the Scouts,
And
so they were very military kind of.
that's right.
They didn't like that.
And
People
they
that
didn't
suffered
know.
from
And the Woodcraft, a lot of people in the Woodcraft felt that girls should be treated the same as boys. But there was nothing for the girls to do at all until about 2 or 3 years after the Scouts were formed, that they had the Girl Guides. And we then, it was a breakaway because the Woodcraft was an organisation that was boys and girls together. And there was no sir and saluting or anything like this, you know. And I spent some good years in the Woodcraft folk.
How old were you when you joined? When you first started going?
I was about 10. The war was still going on, and it was the end of the war, you know. And I can always remember my first camp was down at Portishead, by a radio station, the shortwave radio station at Portishead. And we used to go down and swim in the sea, you know, and had a great time. And with the Woodcraft folk, we went to international camps, you know, and the best international camp, of course, was when I took 12 children to Russia, you know.
So by this time you were leading a group.
Yeah. And by this time I'd married Margaret as well. I'm going ahead.
Yeah,
of
that's
myself.
okay. We can jump around a bit. Let's talk about Russia.
Yeah,
That was the time when you didn't have enough tickets for the children, wasn't it?
that's right. With Paul, this was.
Oh, really?
Because he was only 12 and he was on my passport. And they give one ticket, one passport.
Oh.
But this is the reason, you know, and that was it. And so we managed to get across, well, in fact, we got all the way to London by a bit of manoeuvring and all that, because we had rucksacks on our back. And if you're anywhere near somebody with a big rucksack and he's doing this a bit, you keep out of the way. And this is what happened, really. We were on the trains and we saw the difference in going through. What was going to happen was that we were going to go to Russia by train and they were going to fly us back. And we got to Warsaw and we missed the train going to Russia, what we should have done. But there was another woman with me, and she lives in Exeter, and yeah, we missed the boat. We missed the train, and so we got another train, would push us across the border from Poland into Russia, and at that time the part of Russia they're fighting over now, the Ukraine,
Yeah.
aren't they? And that was Russia then. And just as we got across the border, then the Russian soldiers got on the thing, and we had to get rid of all our food, any apples and pears, and because they would not allow it into their country. We were coming from another country, and Russia wouldn't have any germs or anything brought in by food into their own country. And so that was it. And we all had to have an examination. Myself also, you know. And a doctor was looking after us and looking, you know. And then I can remember the first meal. We all sat round a big table with other, and it was an international camp we were at down on the Black Sea, and there was nationalities of all over. You know, there was French, German, all over. And we sat down, and there was these knobs of looked like ice cream. Of course, everybody made a grab of that, and it was sour cream in blocks. So they didn't eat much of that. But we had a great time, and over 4 weeks, I lost a stone in weight.
Wow.
Because I used to argue, we used to always have a meeting every day about what was going to happen, and they had a leader. The Russians had a leader, and we had leaders, you know, in charge of us, come from the university in Moscow, and they met us before we got to the camp, and and then we had meetings every day, and because they wouldn't let our kids swim in the Black Sea unless they had a doctor and somebody in a boat offshore.
So we're very safety oriented.
Yeah. I think something happened to one of the kids the year before, but this come about because we had them the year before in England, and it was down in Bournemouth at Woodcraft Camp, and we had them in England, and I know they went out for the day, and 3 or 4 of them got lost. And we, you know, I can remember it now. We were worried to death about that, causing an international, you know, Russians coming to this country and getting lost. But we found them in the end, and that was it. And so that's the reason that we went. I took the kids to Russia on the next year. Yeah.
So when you were saying about you had rucksacks on and you were having to, I think you were talking about the ticket inspector, right? So
Yeah.
every time a ticket inspector came up.
Yeah, I would say to the kids, right, just as soon as you've seen the ticket collector, move somewhere else. So he don't know whether he's seen you twice or he's got a bit confused. So that was it. And at times they picked up, when we were going from Poland into Germany, they got all your passports. And then they would give you them when you got out of Germany or to the west of Germany, and they would give your passports back. And you knew which was the east of Germany and west, because around, it wasn't Berlin we were going through, Frankfurt, I think. Yes, it was Frankfurt. As you went through Frankfurt, everything was black. There was no
Electricity.
No, that's right, because at that time, the Americans thought that after the Second World War, they would bring communism would spread throughout Europe, and they were so concerned about that they were giving money to help support, support the people in those countries, and that was it.
So the Woodcraft folk, we were just saying. So Raymond also joined the Woodcraft folk, or
Yes, but by this time, I think your mums were, like, Jane and Claire was in the folk, because Margaret and myself ran a group over just the other side of a few streets away, really, Mangotswood it's called, and in a school, because all our, because we broke away from the Scouts, we wanted somewhere to meet. If you met at a church, you'll find that if it's a Catholic church, all those Scouts were Catholic. If it was a Protestant church or something else, they were that whatever church they were. And we felt in the Woodcraft folk that people should make up their own minds if they wanted to be Catholic or, but if anybody was a Catholic and we got informed to go to church, then we would take these kids to church if we were camping out somewhere, and that's how it used to happen.
So you take them all.
Sorry?
You take them all if one of them was Catholic.
Take them all.
Take them all to the church.
Oh yeah, yeah. What can I say? So Raymond really, I suppose, he joined. When we went to Canada, when I got married and things like that,
you met Grandma at the Woodcraft folk when you were how old?
I think it must have been when I was about 18, something like that. Because by 21, I'd already been to Europe twice on holiday. And what happened there was, I went to an international camp in London, and I met this girl from France. She was in Bristol with somebody else from another school in Bristol, and they come over every year or something like this. And she asked to go to camp. She wasn't a woodcrafter, and they said, we had a meeting, and we said, yeah, let her go. So she went to camp, and I met her in London, and started writing to her. And I'm jumping the gun a bit now. No. Just after the war, after war finished at 45 hours, I was 14 when the war finished, 14, 15, about 16, I went to an international camp in Austria. Now, we went across the channel, and I can't exactly remember now where we went. It must have been from Dover somewhere, and we got on a train, wooden seats, and we were going to Klagenfurt, and that was in Russia, in Austria, and just after Europe was all mixed up. There was people with no homes, all kinds of things, and we lived really on goulash for the 2 weeks we were in Austria. In that time, I met a girl from Vienna. So I come home and started writing to her, and she invited me back the next year to Vienna. And I said to my father about it, and he said, I'd rather you didn't go. He said, because Vienna is a divided city, like Berlin was. It's partly Russian, French, American, and he said, with your politics, you could get into trouble.
A lot of tension there.
Yeah. So he said, what you want to do is get a motorbike. So you have some holiday in England. So Jack, who he's never driven a motorbike before, but we went over to St George,
Mm-hmm.
and they were selling motorbikes, and it was an ex-army one, because it was that colour, the bike, but when you scraped it off, it was
Green, yeah, camouflage.
yeah, camouflaged underneath. And of course,
Do you know what bike that was?
yes, it
what
was a
make?
Triumph 350, and
That'd be a 2-stroke.
no 350,
So it's a 4-stroke
Yeah.
350.
but it was the telescopic forks.
Yeah.
That was I had them before the telescopic forks come in.
So
In the Second World War,
yeah.
they had motorbikes with no telescopic forks.
So you had no front suspension.
Quite a rough ride.
Well, we had it was a spring, but it's not
Right.
like it was today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, I had the motorbike, and then the next camp I went to, then was a camp in London where I met the French girl.
So the Vienna girl, she's done and dusted because
Yeah.
you didn't get to go see her again. So
That's
that's
right.
over.
That was it.
And you stopped writing to her.
So I went and met this other girl from Vienna, from
France.
Bordeaux. She lived in Bordeaux, and that is the time I met Margaret. About the same time, I'd already booked passage and everything else to take my motorbike across. But in those days, of course, you didn't have on and off ferries like you've got today.
Mm-hmm.
They lifted you up in a basket and into the hoard, then that was it. And when you got to the other end, they picked the basket out in, and then you got on your bike. So there was no on and off like that. And so, and of course, there was no roads as such, It was all cobbles in the streets when you went. And I got halfway there, and I thought bed and breakfast for the night. And I was all packed up, of course, with rucksacks and bits and pieces on my motorbike. And I can remember going to this place, and they give me meat. And before I went, I heard they eat horses in France. And I looked at the meat and I thought, I couldn't eat it.
In case it was horse.
Yeah, in case it was, I don't know. So anyway, I then got to Bordeaux, met Johnny, and I was sleeping in a place, in an outback hut,
At her family house.
Yeah. So we used to have dinner and all that with the family. But I didn't go around with Johnny because whenever I went with Johnny, she had somebody with her, like a grandmother or was it a sacrament. So I met then her cousin from North Africa.
Wow.
And then I went around with her for the 2 weeks I wasn't there.
And what did Janny think about that?
Well, it was all together really. We all went round, a bunch of people, you know.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And that was it. So
But you were romantically with her cousin.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
And she didn't have anything to say
Just to be
about
clear.
it.
not really. No,
Oh.
no,
Did you speak any French at the time?
no,
No.
no.
Did they speak English? A bit of English?
Oh
or-
yeah, they
yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was just a one-time visitation.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, I was saying when I went goodbye to Margaret. Well, I just met her, you know. But I did bring her back, and she'd know today what I brought back. It was a powder compact, and heart-shaped powder compact.
Oh, you mean like a makeup
Yeah.
thing with
You
your powder
lift
in?
it up, powder, and you
Oh.
powder your face and all. They
Right,
don't
yeah.
do it these days,
Yeah.
do they?
Wow.
You brought Grandma back a present from your trip to France,
France,
to see
yeah.
these young ladies. But you weren't courting Grandma at that time.
I was just beginning to, yeah, you know.
And what did Grandma say about this? Did she know that you'd been?
Oh, she knew all about it because she knew I was going to France and what was going to happen because she was in the Woodcraft as well, and I met her at Sunday Night Club. And in those days, of course, there was no cinema on the Sunday, and buses ran until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that was it on a Sunday.
So what was Sunday Night Club?
Sunday Night Club was all the leaders and anybody over the age of 18 or 16, I think it was, over the co-op in Bedminster. And it was just a club to go to. Like if you'd been out hiking for the day or cycling for the day or whatever you were doing, we would all meet up there and over a cup of tea and a biscuit and have a chat, and that was it. Yeah, so that was Sunday Night Club.
Do you remember meeting Grandma? Remember when you first set eyes on Grandma?
Well, that it was Sunday Night Club. I was going to. She'll tell you that I was going with someone else at the time, and I said to Margaret about coming out, and she said, "Well, she said you're going out with I forget her name now, and if you give her up, I'll come out with you." So I give her up, and we started courting, and that was it.
You broke it off with the other
With the
girl
other
straight
girl.
away.
Eh?
Straight away, you broke it off with the other girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was it. And then, of course, because I was serving an apprenticeship, everybody at that time had to go in the army for 2 years. And so I got deferred because of my apprenticeship. And people going to university got deferred as well. And so I didn't go in the army until I was 21.
That's when you finished your apprenticeship.
That's right, yeah. Just about to earn some good money, and
That was a long apprenticeship, 16 to 21. Did you say
Wow.
it was 16?
Yeah. A long time to do an apprenticeship.
yeah, it always those days.
Yeah. That was the gas
Eh?
apprenticeship,
Yeah.
the gas company. And so you joined the army, but not through choice. You wouldn't have through choice.
Well, at that time, I was a member of the Communist Party.
The Communist
Yeah.
Party, and that was a political party in the UK that was up for communism.
It wasn't a bard. They didn't, they accepted people. We only ever had one communist in the House of Commons.
Mhm.
Nobody ever,
Do you remember his name?
oh God, no.
No, that's interesting. I'll look it up.
Yeah. Anyway, down in Fishponds, I used to go for clubs and, do things. And And at that time, we were fighting the communists, of course, in Korea. Now, they were fighting the communists, and I was a communist. So what do I do? And I was on the verge of saying, no, I won't be going to the army. But I spoke to my father and he said, look, the easiest way out is to go. It's only 2 years. Have a good time when you're in there, he said, and that's it.
Interesting that he told you to do that when he was a conscientious objector in World War One, isn't it?
Because he knew the problems he had.
And that's because of his time in prison.
Yeah.
His own.
Yeah. And people looked down on him, of course. And
After the war as well, people remembered.
Well, yeah.
and- yeah.
You remember the white feather they used to give people?
Really? Yeah. And what is World War Two? Was your father too old then to be conscripted?
Oh yeah.
So he
yeah.
didn't need to
No,
conscientiously object to that.
he
one.
was ARP warden then.
What's
the main, Ed used to wear a tin helmet and look for bombs coming from the,
Wow.
the sentry bombs used to drop, and what to do, and you had sandbags to put on the sentry bombs.
Wow.
And
Air
that
raid
was it.
something maybe.
And we dug a shelter called an Anderson shelter
Mhm.
in our garden, and we used to go in there with the Blitz when the Blitz hit Bristol. They used to come along.
So you remember that?
Oh yeah,
So the siren would go off, and
yeah, and off we would go down to the shelter. But and my eldest brother was around then as well. He hadn't gone in the Navy then.
Jack.
And Jack. Yeah.
Is that because he was also doing some kind of education or apprenticeship?
No, well, he was. No, this was in the wartime. Where it's, yeah.
He was too young to go to the Navy at that
Yeah,
time.
he did. They called him up at 18. He was,
It was
was
right at the
about
end of the
18, yeah,
war. You said yes. Sorry.
at the end
Yeah.
of the war. And yeah, the nearest I got from being bombed was where I used to live. They had streets there, gardens, streets, gardens, and the German bomber, or whatever it was, dropped a load of bombs, but missed it every other street. And they bombed that street, which was houses, and the dirt come over onto the shelter in our garden, and my father was there, mother, and we thought the house had gone. So we looked out at the shelter, but there was a lot of smoke and dust and everything else, but our house was still staying,
Right.
and the bomb was dropped in the other street.
You missed your street out.
Mm.
When you were in the shelter each time when there was an air raid on, how long would you have to stay in there for?
Well, depending on the all clear.
So they'd sound the siren for the whole time that the raid's on, and then
No,
after a period
no.
of time.
It was how was it went? The all clear was one sound, it started, but the warning
Mhm.
was up and down, and then that was the Germans, and of course what they were trying to do is hit the airplane works at Filton. Yeah.
Did you have like food and things in the shelter, or was it only ever a
No.
short period of time? Yeah.
It was just kind of a make shoe bed and sit down, and that was it really.
And do you remember what it felt like when you were sat in there? Were you really worried? Were your parents worried, or?
I don't think I was more interested in what was happening outside, really, And of course, going to school, then I would be picking up shrapnel. Because in Bristol we had a Purdown in Bristol, we had what they call Purdown Percy, a big gun. I never think when in the raid was coming, it come over England in Bristol, it would go. It made a hell of a noise, but I don't know whether it hit any planes down, I know. But you would pick up shrapnel and things like this. And, yeah. So I spent all my years in school through the war.
On rations.
Oh, yeah. But everybody had a fair share.
Which you liked as a communist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there we are.
So you were going to tell us about how you joined the army.
Oh, yeah.
Had 2
So
years.
anyway, my father said, you know, have a good time, and that's it. So I took his advice and joined. And I wanted to, hoping to go abroad. You see, because the Korean War was on, coming to an end, and we had the Costers were in Korea because they had a citation from the President of the United States at that time, a blue piece of there, because when they were fighting the North Koreans, they had to hold some ground to let the Americans get back, because the Americans were trapped, and we then just ran out of ammunition. By all accounts, what I've been told, I speaking then to the people that got imprisoned, come back to the army, and then we started to train for the Mau Mau in Kenya. This was in Kenya. They call it the Mau Mau. It's a secret organisation wanted to have independence, but we, you know, we give them independence eventually, but not until they sent troops over to, you know, put them in, lock them up, and all kinds of things, you know. Yeah.
You were training for that, or you went to that?
We went. They were training for that.
Yeah.
But I didn't have enough time left in the army to do that, because I was on the Carnation in London.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We were all they made us a uniform, like a jacket and trousers with a red stripe going down the, you know. I got mistaken for a policeman lots of times going around London, but we were up there about 2 weeks, and we were there really in case they broke through the lines, because on the Carnation they lined the route
Mm-hmm.
with soldiers and things like this.
For a parade.
Yeah, but we were never called. I never seen any procession. We were in the tent, and the police were one way all gambling, and that was it. And yeah, that was it. I can remember my mother sending me up a 2 and 6 postal order. What's 2 and 6? 2 shillings
Right.
and 6pence postal order.
What's a postal order? Is that money?
Oh, a postal order is money. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But you get this
At the post office.
at the post office, and then put it in an envelope and send it off, and then you got it to get the next post office and cash it in. Like. They would give you the 2 and 6.
Like Western Union.
Hmm.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, yeah. And we were under canvas, and the guy on my right hand side and the guy on the left, his father was a gentleman farmer, and this guy here he had a business in Cheltenham. Yeah, they both come from Cheltenham. They had £5 and £10 sent to them, and I had 2 and 6 sent to me. But there again, you know, that was it. And food parcels. My mother used to send food parcels now and again.
What did you get in the food parcels? What did she send you?
She'd send me a cake, chocolate bars,
Oh.
and
Lovely.
things like this.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Is that because it wasn't a very good wage when you were training, or?
Yes, I suppose they felt that you only had a limited amount of money, and if you didn't eat the food that was served up in the mess, then you went to where there was a place they used to sell food. Well, I forget now what they call it, and but you only had a limited amount of money, and that was it. I never had very much money, until I married. When I was an apprentice, the way I got money was, we used to go to people's houses, and we fit the meter, gas meter in the front, and the cooker in the kitchen at the back. And then you'd put a pipe all the way under the floor to the kitchen, put down, connect it up. And then if it was an old house, they would have pipe already there, so you take that out, and I'd put it in a sack, put it on my bike, rucksack, and take it down the scrapyard and, sell it. And copper pipe and lead pipe.
And were you allowed to do that, or were you meant to do something else with that?
No, there was never a golden rule about it.
Oh, so it was a freebie.
It was.
But were you on your own doing that work, or was there other people that also wanted to take it?
No, I was on my own. Or even if I was, when I was an apprentice, I wasn't on my own. I was with a fitter then.
Yeah. And did he take the mess?
He didn't bother.
Oh, he didn't bother. No, didn't need it.
He didn't need it. No. So that was me.
Yeah. So when you were in the army, did you have fun training and everything? Did you enjoy it?
I did, in a way. Yeah.
Make some good friends?
Yeah. We went to. Because when we went in, mostly it was the people I was with, an apprentice with, in Bristol. So all the apprentices in that year, or whatever, they all joined in the same, they all went in the Gosters. Yeah. But I got put on Jankers now and again.
What's that?
This is, if you've done something wrong, didn't clean your rifle properly, or didn't salute, something like that, you'd get disciplined. And so you would have to go down the guardhouse and be on guard, and all night really, and you took it in turns, so many hours on, so many hours off, and then the guard commander would inspect you, make sure that you were all right, or your boots were cleaned and everything else. And then you would go back to your own billet in the morning when it finished.
You'd be tired.
Yeah. But there we are.
What do they call that? A Jankus?
Jankers. So yes, we had some great times. One particular thing, I had my motorbike at Warminster camp, and because we were in support company, we were actually in Warminster itself, but the battalion was at another camp about 5 miles outside of Warminster towards Southampton way. And if you weren't ever going that way driving, you'd see the camp, But anyway, and we had radiators on the wall, and everything was posh, You had to clean it with a bumper, a brush and cloths and polish and all this jazz. And so I had my motorbike there, and then come 5 o'clock, tea time, you either went to tea, and then you had done nothing at night, books or read or whatever. And I used to come and see Margaret. And there was Ike Williams, he was in the he was also on a motorbike. So we used to go into Bristol because he was courting as well. I was courting Margaret, and never had very much money, of course, to buy petrol. So then this one particular time, there was two lance corporals. Said, "Yeah, you're going into Bristol tonight. Any chance of a lift? And we'll pay for the petrol." So we said, "Right, all right, yeah, okay, jump on." So they jumped on. And if you've never driven a motorbike with a sack of potatoes, you know, it's the guy at the back. Oh,
Yeah.
don't
So
sway.
mean, yeah.
Oh, it's like a terrible, you know. Anyway, get into Bristol, and we said, right, on the centre, we'll see you at 12 o'clock. Said, yeah, okay. So I went to see Margaret, went to the pictures, took her home, down on the centre. They were there waiting, and I what was it now? They couldn't get any petrol in the van, in the motorbike. So Ike Williams was there. We both went together. So we went back to camp with these two lance corporals on the back, and we were about, I suppose, 5 miles from Warminster, and that was it. The bike was
Oh no.
ran out. So Ike Williams said, "Oh God," he said, "Well, you could take the guy on his, back to camp." He said, "I don't know what to say about you." And one of those lance corporals said, "Take me back, Ike," he said, "and I'll get some transport and bring it out." So that was it. So I was left with one lance corporal myself. The other lance corporal got on Ike's bike, went into camp. And about an hour and a half afterwards, up comes this aft track, it was, tank, coming up the road. So, now this was, we were in the anti-tank platoon, and we used to use these aft track things to carry our gun,
Mm-hmm.
And so you could sit in, but you drove it like a tank. If
Mm-hmm.
you get
Yeah,
its
one track,
handles
one
like
track, yeah.
this, you see, you don't, yeah. So of course we tried to put my motorbike up, couldn't be done.
Heavy.
Too heavy.
Very heavy.
Even between the four of you.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, 3 of us, because
Yeah.
Ike Williams,
I went to bed.
he went to bed, right? And the other guy got in the tank, so he come back. So there's the tank and us 3. So we thought, I said, well, leave it in the hedge. That's it. Nobody can drive it. It's not got no petrol. And I said, I'll get a can or something and get a lift out, So this is what we did. So we went back into the camp. And at that time, they used to have a guard on all the vehicles and things, because we used to do demonstrations on the planes. So as we went up, this guy coming along, bit big stick. He said, "You've got to report to the guard commander," he said. He said, "You shouldn't have taken this tank." We jumped out, and one of the lance corporals got hold of it. He said, "You haven't seen us, have you?" And he pushed him like that, and we ran, and that was the last we heard. That was it. We got away with it.
You had to go back and get your bike at some point.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think the sergeant in our platoon, I think he knew what was happening. Yeah, because I used to have wrestling matches with him.
With the sergeant?
Yeah, he was in with and
For fun or for sport?
for fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And
Do you like a good wrestle?
it was. I often said. I said to him once. I said, "Why don't you get out into Civvy Street?" He said, "Look," he said, and he was, I think, in Civvy Street a brickie, bricks.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I get up in the morning, go to bed at night. They feed me, they pay me. why should I go into Civvy Street? And so that was it. And then we went to Barnard Castle then. And that's the first time I ever went into a pub and saw women having pints. Because back in this country, you'd never seen a woman on her own in a pub. They would be in the bar around by the side, in the lounge bar or somewhere like that. But up there, it was just another world in County Durham, I'll tell you. And then we decided to go out we didn't decide, but they decided for us to go out on what do they call it? You had to have a big bivouac and all your stuff on a route march, and it was going to last a week, you know. So every day we get the wagons come up give us breakfast. We had breakfast and pack up and carry on walking. We walked for a week, all around the moors.
Wow.
And I said to somebody, I said, look, we're not going to be able to get any cigarettes. I smoked at that time. I said, I'll tell you what, if we buy loose cigarettes, we can roll them ourselves, you know. It wasn't such a good idea because it bloody rained most of that week, and as you roll it, drip, oh God. So, yeah. But, and then, I was coming almost out of my time then, you know, out of the army. They wanted somebody to train people for motorbike riding, for dispatch riding, you know, and so they wanted me to do that, and so I thought, well, you know, I'm out on the moors, and that was it. But they detected it was a sergeant and corporal and two others, about 2 or 3 of us. They all followed me, and I was trying to teach them how to pass their test, I suppose, whatever. And then we used to call into a place, and they made apple tarts. They were beautiful. The only place there, right on the moors. And we used to call it Mar, I think. Let's go to Mars. And it was that was it. You went over the hill, and there was 2 houses there. And one of them, you know, you stopped, and that was it.
What moors are these? Dartmouth.
No,
Dartmoor.
we're in Yorkshire Moors.
Yorkshire Moors.
We're in County Durham. Yeah. And so, all in all, I had a good time in the army. Of course, so when we come out, I was 5 years courting Margaret. We'd been going out with each other for 5 years. And I went back to the gas company then, and what was it then? There was a house. No, they had a gas shop where they used to have shops selling gas cookers and heaters, and you know, and the electric people used to do the same thing. And there was a place in Kingswood that had the shop, and there was a flat going, pardon me, above the shop. So I said to Margaret, yeah, about it, you know. She said, well, we got to get married first. So that was the start, and we didn't go into the shop, but that was the start of things, you know, getting engaged and thinking of marriage and things like this, you know. And we had some good times, Margaret and myself, on the motorbike.
Mm-hmm.
Went down Cornwall, went on our holiday, and knocked in one house, bed and breakfast, And they showed us to a double room. I said, we can't take that. I said, we're not married. Can you believe it? Wouldn't happen today, would it? So we had separate rooms then. And we went and we had a holiday together once as well on the Isle of Wight. And we had separate rooms in it as well. Yeah. That was in a hotel though, on the Isle of Sandown.
And you're in separate rooms now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So there we are.
So you got married to Grandma in Bristol in the church where I've been climbing.
That's right.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, some Woodwards.
We can go there. We can go climbing. Let's go.
Mm.
We've been there.
Yeah.
Times.
Because when did let's see. I'm thinking now. Because we went to Canada.
After you got married.
Yeah. Got married and 10 weeks and we were going to Canada. So we lived with her mother in her house. So where was it? Just trying to think where she lived now. In a council house somewhere. And we lived there for 10 weeks. And it was the middle of June, I think it was, that we sailed out of Liverpool. And took about 4 days to get to Montreal. And we saw an iceberg on the way. And they had a competition. You had to write down how many miles you figured that iceberg was away, you know.
Oh yeah.
And
No one got it.
yeah, you were way out, you know. You would say, 5 miles or 2 miles or whatever, and it was 15 miles away. Yeah. But as we come down into St. Lawrence, we looked out and we could see houses, all different coloured roofs. And because how they do there is they build their house and they put 3-ply wood on the roof and they nail the tiles to the roof. So it could be a green, a brown, blue, and it looked very nice from a distance.
Because the tiles were different colours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then we got to where we went into Montreal. Yeah. That's as far as the boat would go. Or was it Quebec? No, I think it was Montreal. Got on the train then down to Toronto. And when we got to Toronto, there was somebody that Margaret's mother knew somebody that knew somebody in Canada, and that's how it's, you know. And they were there, and they picked us up, and of course, all the lights, 1960. This is 59. I've never seen so many lights and everything else, because everything in this country was a bit still not rationed as such, but you couldn't get things at this time. Things were bad. And gets in the car with them, and eventually we get out of town, and it was just black. Then we go down this bumpy road, stops. She said, "Well, this is it. We're home." We get there, and it's like a tin house almost. The toilet was in one room with a curtain, so you know.
Wow.
And so she said, "Yeah." So we looked out the window, and there was raccoons, and a man, a boy, and a girl, and all the little ones climbing the tree, and that was the first. We thought, well, God, we're in Canada, and that was it. And then, of course, we had to find a job. Now, Margaret didn't really want to work. First of all, she wanted to look around and have a rest. We met our bridesmaid was already in Canada, so we met up with her, Pat Bodie, and and she went to Canada with about 4 other girls together, and we met up with her, and she was going out with a German guy, and it was him that got me the job in the bakery, and I was went in the bakery, and they said, "Have you ever worked in the bakery before?" And I knew a little bit about the bakery because my father used to talk about bread being ill and things like this. And I said, "Well, yes, I served a little time in England, you know." They said, "Well, we got this machine." They said, "You know, we'll bring you the bread, and what we want you to do is make breadcrumbs." And what they used to do I suppose they still do it now, when they make bread, they put it in paper, cover it up, and they put the date, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So if you were having that loaf and you went on a Tuesday and you picked it up and it said Monday, "Oh, I don't want that, that's yesterday's." So there we are. So all the star bread that they couldn't sell went back to the bakery, and I used to rip it up, put it on a tray, push the button, and the machine used to go wrong. But I had to make sure that that bread didn't come out brown, like toast. It had to be white for breadcrumbs.
Yeah, hang on a sec, Grant. So you said you ripped it up. You have to rip the bread up into little pieces
No,
by
no,
hand.
no, rip
Machine
the
did that.
paper off the bread.
Right, and then the whole loaf of bread goes into the machine.
It was all sliced.
Sliced bread goes into the
All
machine.
sliced.
Right,
And I put it on the plate. Yeah,
and then it's toasted, basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I had to make sure that it didn't, you know,
Yeah.
and you had buttons to push, you know, and then of course I went to the gas company because I only went there on a promise of an interview. I knew that they were running a gas pipe, natural gas, from Alberta all the way to Ontario, and in between they were running different pipes, you know, to all the towns and villages. So, and of course, they were building lots and lots of houses in Toronto. So they really wanted gas fitters, you know. I said, "Well, thank you, Dad." Really?
Yeah.
To myself.
He was right.
Yeah. So, and they said, "Well, you got the job, yeah." You know, they showed me a plan, and can you do this? And I said, "Oh yeah, I could do that." Did that? Yeah. They said, "Well, can you drive?" And I said, "No, only a motorbike." Ah, they said, "You want a chauffeur's license?" And I said, "What's a chauffeur's license?" He said, "Well, there's 2 kinds of licenses in this country. One is an ordinary license where you drive a car. The other one you can drive a van or a truck." So the one I had to drive the truck, so I had to learn to drive. And the bakery was about the worst job I've ever done in my life.
Making breadcrumbs.
Yeah, but it was the time, you see, you would get on the streetcar because it was the other side of Toronto. Now all the streets in Toronto was like this, or like that. And we were on Queen Street living at the time, that's the bottom of Toronto. Get on the streetcar, by the time you got to work, you went in and they say, "Oh, we've had a breakdown. Come back in 2 hours." Well, there's no way I could get a train. I didn't have enough money to go home for 2 hours. So I went out on the benches. This was in June, man. It was hot weather. And waited for 2 hours, and then I'd go in and that was it. But before they would pay you overtime, in the week you had to work 40 hours before they would, and you would never ever get up to 40 hours. One day you'd work 12 hours straight off. Next day, 2 hours because it'd been broke down. And the next day it was to catch up, so it was a terrible job.
Wow.
But
Did you have to be in very early?
I did, I think, yeah, shift work. And then I had to come out and learn to drive. And used to get in and we'd be driving around. He said, do you know, he said, I'm bloody wasting, I'm paying the money, mate. I'm wasting my bloody time here, he said. You know, concentrate on what you're doing. And oh God, you know. And of course I was tired doing it and all this like. In that time, Margaret had gone in town and she'd seen an advert for a job in the paper. And so she went there and it was in insurance office. And she finished up in Bristol in an insurance office. So she knew a little bit about it. And that was it. So she got the job. And of course I was then, you know, learning how to drive. So eventually went in for my test and I passed. So goes to the gas company. Oh, good, he said, right. He said, right, he said, I would like you to, the foreman of the vehicles, he said, would like you to go around the block and see how you drive and all that, you know. So he got in with me, we drove around the block. Yeah, okay, that's all right. He said, park it up here, he said. So, and all the vans were parked there, there's the fence, you know. And I drive in, and the wheel was turned a bit that way to the, but when I got in to drive it the next time, bang, I hit the bloody car next door because I should have straightened the wheels to come out. I didn't. I hit.
So the first time you went off on your own, you crashed straight into another
I
van.
went in and had an accident.
What do they have to say about that?
Well, I had to make a report out and all this, like, you know, but there wasn't much damage done, so that was it. And then I went out with a fitter for a couple of weeks to know the ropes of the thing, you know, and you had a radio in the car, in the van. So every time you finished a job, you know, you rang in and said, I'm finishing. And the way I made money those days was no heat calls. Now, your grandmother has got the same kind of furnace that I used to service. Now,
Really?
this was heating. They
Well,
used to
that's
put the
not
furnace in the basement. All houses had basements. So of course he would have the furnace in the basement and the duct running along to each room.
Mm.
And of course, then somebody would cover up a part of the air to get into the place and close it down. It wouldn't work. Then the next time, the motor, wouldn't work because of the fuse had gone. But over there, you'd look at a fuse box and they were all glass.
Yeah, so you could see them. You had
Yeah.
to look at each of them and see if it was
Yeah,
connected or not.
and
Yeah.
twisty-turny. You know,
Yeah.
you twist them out. And, you know, put one back, it starts, and then thinking you're God's gift to... Of course, you were talking about bad weather, you know.
Yeah, so if they didn't have heating, it would be
Oh,
pretty
God.
chilly.
Yeah.
So how
So-
come that made you more money than?
Tips.
Well, because it was overtime,
Yeah.
and then then you might have 2 jobs to do.
Mm-hmm.
You do them 2 jobs, and you phone in again and say, I'm on my way back. Oh, just one more, just another one. And so,
So you got paid per job?
no,
Hourly.
no,
Hourly rate.
hourly rate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to leave you for a second to the toilet. Let's carry on.
What's the time?
I don't know what the time is. Oh, 7 o'clock. Just got 7.
Now, are we still on?
Yeah, this is still running.
Yeah, good.
Did when you went to Canada, did you go with the intention of just going for a few years and coming home, or did you think we're going to go and live in Canada?
Well, we had
Permanently.
we really had an open mind about that. My father thought we would be going for good.
Really?
Oh yeah. But we thought, well, we'd try it. We had nothing. You see, we had nothing to lose
Mhm.
because we hadn't bought a house, and people at the wedding, with our wedding, give us money instead. You know,
So you put that towards your trip.
yeah. And so that was it, really.
Mm.
So, but I think if Margaret could drive, I think it would have been a bit different. She felt, you know, I don't know really, she felt a bit isolated, I think.
I see.
But luckily, luckily we met, when we met a friend of hers, when she worked in the office, Dorothy and Ray. Ray was a Londoner, married her when he immigrated, and she got friendly with Margaret, invited us out to her house, and they had a cottage in the country, and we used to go in the cottage, and there was a gang of us really, or grandmother, and she used to do all, you know, and when out in the country, it was about, I don't know, 200 or 300 miles from Toronto, out in the sticks, and then
Wow, there must have been a town closer to where you lived in Toronto, or you mean it wasn't 200 miles to the nearest city?
sorry.
It was 200 miles from Toronto, but there was presumably somewhere.
Oh yeah,
Town.
well, you went through.
Yeah.
You went. Oh yeah, this is where her cottage was.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big lake where her cottage was as well, and because they used to go fishing in the lake. I went fishing once, never again, but
Why's
Never
that?
again.
and duck shooting. He used to shoot ducks. This was Raymond, who was a husband of Dorothy,
Yeah.
who was working in the same office as Margaret. Look, so and every Christmases we used to go there, and bank holidays and all kinds of things.
Mm.
Really, they just took us under their wing, and yeah, we had a great time. And of course, you had to take the women up the garden if they wanted to go to the loo at night, because somebody had seen a couple of tracks of bear,
Wow.
you know,
Yeah.
and they wasn't going to go up there with a bear around.
No.
But you know,
Did you ever see one when you were in Canada?
I would, yeah, when we went around the States, but you know, yeah. So of course, then we decided to come home, and
After
by
how
this
long?
time I bought an MG,
Mm-hmm.
and I bought the MG about 12 months after I got to Canada. Yeah, and it was only going to be an MGA, or was it Austin Neely or something like that? But it's a second-hand Austin Neely or a brand new MGA. So I went for the MGA, and then we decided that we'd take a trip around the States, and so we thought, well, how are we going to get around the States? Is it going to be too expensive having bed and breakfast? We thought, right, what we'll do is buy a tent. But they didn't sell tents like we knew as tents. So we went to a place where they got some Egyptian cotton
Right.
and made a tent for us.
Out of cotton.
Yeah.
So hopefully it didn't rain.
Well, no, it was. Yeah, but you had another sheet on top as well.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that was all right. It was they used to have big, thick, heavy material to do this.
Mm.
So anyway, off we went with pots and pans. You could just imagine this in a two-seater. We didn't have much room in the back, in the boot. Pots and pans, all our clothes and equipment and all this to go camping. Well, we went down, we left Toronto, there were about 2 inches of snow on the ground, and we got down to Washington, and the sun was out and the blossoms on the trees. And by the time we got down to Florida, it was dead, very, very hot, blisters on your nose, you went, oh dear, open air, So we went round the Everglades and done all these things, and went then across Texas into Mexico. Now we were told that do not stop for anything between cities in Mexico because of the bandits around. People would, hold you up and all this.
Did you run into any trouble like that?
No trouble at all. But we did see people going through villages, washing their clothes in the stones in their,
Wow.
and mud huts. It was really made with mud and straw and all this. And we got down to Mexico City and got to the university, where there's one wall of the university with all the different coloured stones of all the provinces in Mexico. Look, beautiful university place. But Margaret was pregnant because we intended to bring that car, or I did, back to England.
Wow.
But two-seater, Margaret, that was it. So I had to come back because I was best man at Raymond's wedding, And in all that time, he'd been in the army as well, doing his time, and that was it. So we left Mexico. I wanted to go on the coast somewhere. I can't think of the name of the place now, but we met some people in Canada who'd gone down. They worked at the BAC planes at Filton, and they'd gone down to LA to work doing the same kind of thing in the States. And so we met them at Easter there, and we had an Easter parade with them, and there was an Easter parade, and we stayed with them for a bit, and I think we wired to get some money or something, but we didn't use the tent only once, and that was at the Grand Canyon.
So where did you stay? Or it was just warm enough you didn't need it?
No, we stayed at
Motels.
Dead easy, about $2 a night, and next breakfast, and it wasn't worth tent really. Only once did we use that tent, and somebody come up by us. And our tent was big, with a small car. They had the very reverse. They had a great big car and a small tent. But there again, that was it. So, and then we went up to the coast to Vancouver. Went over to Vancouver Island. Then got to Banff, and I'd left the radio going all night. It was in a wooden hut there in Banff, and gets up next morning. But luckily, of course, it was in the days of you put something in there and you.
Oh, I had a starting handle.
Yeah,
Very good.
and that was it. We got going, and then we went all the way back across Canada to Toronto.
And then you came back for Ray's wedding.
Yeah.
So how many years were you away in total, do you know? It seems like you did a lot. It must have been a long time.
No, it wasn't. Only, I think, about 2.5, 3 years.
Oh, wow.
That's all. And I used to go down and see my cousin, that she lived in Philadelphia. And we used to go to, from Toronto to New England and go down to New York and around New York into Philadelphia. And that's where she lived at Southerton. It was a village just outside of the place. And then, because she married a GI, so she was, he was assistant manager at a bank. George, his name was. Lovely guy, But there we are. So then we sold the car, and the only thing that had gone wrong with that car was a speedo. Must have been something wrong with the cable or something. So we stayed at a friend's house, and they were Scottish people, but he worked at the gas company in Toronto, and I knew him, so we, and so we put an advert in the paper, but only one person come to see the car, and he had a piece of paper, and he said, how many miles? So, right. Because I said I wanted it until I left to go to England. I wanted another week.
Mm.
And so we drove the car eventually. No, we were going to drive the car across the other side of Toronto, which was about 15, 20 miles. And I said, but he's got to know the difference. I had to sign to say that this was,
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So we said, all right. So we increased the mileage
You just rolled it on.
the thing, brought it on, and went over to his house. He come out, looked around and all that, and I think it was paid us some money or something like that now, and off we went. And I was getting on that plane, looking at it back, thinking somebody's going to run after me. But then, of course, we got on the plane. No, it wasn't in Toronto. We went then with my cousin, Valerie, who was married, we used to meet, see, and we went for a week's holiday on Atlantic coast. I can't think of the name of the place now. Anyway, and then we went back to Toronto, back to New York, because it wasn't very far from New York. Said goodbye to my cousin, back to New York, catch the plane, and we flew out of Hyderabad Airport. They call it Kennedy Airport now, but there's 3 airports around New York. Mm-hmm. Anyway, got on the plane, and we the window was there. We sat down. Margaret sat there, window, and 2 seats there looking at us and a table.
Oh, lovely.
And it was the first commercial jet in the world to fly from York to England. The Comet.
Wow.
So we flew on the Comet.
Wow.
And in those days I had a threepenny bit in my pocket.
What on earth is that?
It's a coin. I got one upstairs. A coin with 8 edges around.
Right.
And I put it up. It's only about that round. I put it on the table, and we looked out the window, and we were then flying at about 30,000, 36,000 feet. And a bit different to the prop,
Yeah.
which flew at
Lower.
you know.
Yeah.
And we looked out the window. On my left, it was darkness. On my right, it was light, and I could see just the slight curve of the world.
Side note. So you don't believe that the Earth is flat?
No, I don't.
Interesting.
So we were telling this American who was sat with us, looking at, with a little thing, about they were just building a new airport, and it's Heathrow, and we're saying praise it all up. It's going to be the best in all this. When we landed, we went through a tin hut. That was it. We didn't go through the building. They had, so the rough part of the building, we went through customs, and that was it. Yeah. And then, of course, I started working for myself.
As a gas fitter in this country?
No, as a plumber.
Oh.
Yeah, I went plumbing. We put in, the flats down in Bristol, putting the drainage pipes in, and then I started working for a firm in Bristol, a well-known firm. Can't remember the name of it now, and building houses out at Chipping Sodbury Way.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go there, and by this time I borrowed an old car or somebody's, I forget now. Anyway, I was playing rugby at this time, of course, because I learnt rugby in school, and then I started while I was left school playing for a junior team, and then when I went to the gas company, they wanted me to play in their team, but it was a man's team. And I was about 17 at this time. I'd been playing for another team in Bristol, and I'd already joined a cycling club as well, Western Road. And cycling was the thing I did, and rugby, and that was it. So, where am I?
You were going to tell us about your Threat Me bit,
Yeah.
but nothing ever came of that.
Sorry.
You put a threatening bit on the table,
That's right.
and you saw that
And
the
it
Earth
did
was
not
round.
move. It
Right.
didn't fall down
Oh, you stood it
on
up.
its edge.
on edge.
Wow.
Jeez.
Of course, those planes had an accident later on, didn't they?
Did they?
Oh,
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, they found out because the RAF was an RAF plane,
Mm-hmm.
and as I say, it's the first commercial jet plane. No other jets are anywhere else in the world. And they found out eventually that it had square windows, and it was something to do with the window. It should have been. If you go into a plane now and look out the window, it's shaped.
Mm-hmm.
It's not square,
Mm-hmm.
and it was something to do with the windows that caused it to crash.
Wow.
Blimey.
Yeah, they had two go down, I think. Yeah.
So when you arrived back in the UK from your commercial jet flight, you had a pregnant grandma who was pregnant with Paul,
Yeah.
and you started working for yourself as a plumber.
Yeah. Went to the wedding. She had if you ever see a photograph of it, she had a blue thing she bought in New York, which nobody'd ever seen before in this country. It was blue silk, and it was quite a thing, really.
Wow.
Because You see, we in this country, you still had black telephones. If you want a telephone, and if you wanted a telephone, you 10 to 1, you'd be having it with somebody else. You pick up your phone to ring, and somebody else would be talking on it. Are you going to be too long? Oh no, it's all right.
A completely different person in
Yeah.
another house. Yeah.
And no colour telephones. You know, and when I'm looking back, and I can remember Dunkirk. You know, they made a film about it, haven't they?
Mm. Have you seen the film?
No,
No.
no. I was then, what was I? 12, 13, something like this. Up Stapleton Road railway station. And they just got the troop. I didn't really know what was happening until afterwards. How they sent boats, small boats, over to France to pick the guys up.
Yeah. Commandeered private vessels, everything they could.
And these guys were in a train, and they wanted cigarettes because we didn't have cigarettes because we didn't smoke. We were too young, and they were throwing coins out. So this is when I got my first French coin. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So then,
Did you buy a house when you got back
yes, we did.
in
Yeah.
Bristol?
Yeah, we could manage to save. I think about £100 a month or something like this, which we sent back to my mother, who put it in the bank. In this country, and then when we left Canada, we brought money back, but that was in a check, but it was in dollars. So we took it to the bank for them to change, and they changed it on the stock exchange. They said, look, when it's the best, it goes up and down, as you know, and so that's when we got some money from there, and also the money so we could buy. The house was, no, this was 5,000. This is must have been about £2,000, and we could spend half of that. We paid up front.
Wow.
But it didn't leave us with very much money afterwards. I was still playing rugby at that time. And the guy next door to us, and then we were also, this was, then he called in one day and he said, have a look up in your roof space, he said. And of course it wasn't, it was tiles and that was it. The snow got under the tiles, and there was snow that deep in our roof space.
Wow.
Margaret was pregnant with the twins, and so we tried to I had a ladder. I got up, scooped it down, handed it down to Margaret. Margaret was out here trying to get rid of we couldn't get rid of the snow. It lasted until Easter.
Oh my God.
Even in the streets, I mean.
Yeah.
We got rid of the snow in the ceiling, so
Oh,
it
okay,
didn't
yeah.
fall through. But, and then we realised, we should,
Move.
well, we discussed about me going back to Canada or Russia or America.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, let's try America. So I wrote to my cousin, and she said she would sponsor me, because to go there then and to work, you had to have a green ticket to work, but also you had to have money, so much money in the bank, so many thousand in the bank, or somebody there that if you fell ill or something, you're not a liability on the country.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. So I went on my own, and Margaret was left with got 6-month-old children, twins and a boy, Paul, which I shouldn't have got on my own, but we discussed it, and that was it.
Is that because you needed the money to raise the 3 kids and you weren't earning it in the UK?
That's right, yeah. We were a lot poorer then, we thought, than we were in Canada. We thought, well, let's go back to the milk and honey type.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I went back to the States, and then I found a job for the time being. One was in a skirt factory, no, blouse factory, making blouses for women. And I was with another guy with a big machine, all the cloth, a long table, and this machine you wheel it along, and and the cloth was on the table, and it would come down clamping like that, and you pick it up, take it next door, and the women on the machine would be making the skirts, blouses, next door. And met up with some old woman. She said, on your own? I said, yeah. Got a wife in England. Oh, you must be lonely all on your own. I come over. You know, she invited me out to her house. But I didn't go.
Yeah, good idea, Grandad. Good call.
So I stuck that job for a bit. And I thought, another job down the road. So I go in making children's furniture. And, you know, little kids' things. Now, you used a compressed gun, air gun. And that was a hard job. I was in the middle of the room. People were making bits and pieces all around me, giving me the bits and pieces. I was putting them together, and my arm, I couldn't move my arm. So I said, about a week I only took it for a week. I said, I'm going to have to go. No, he said, stay. You're doing a good job. He said, no, stay. He said, I'll give you an extra so many cents, 6 cents over the rate. He said, you know. I stuck it for another week. No good. And if you didn't go fast enough with the stew, you had to get a pair of pliers and pull the bloody screw out again.
Try again.
Oh, God, that was terrible. And then I thought, right. So I left there, and I went round the Lakeheads looking for a job, and nothing about really. I wanted a gas job, and so I thought, well, this is it.
Do anyone want a cup of tea? Sorry.
I'm
Trying to ring me.
going to thumb it up to Canada and see if I get my old job back.
Mm-hmm.
So I thumbed up to Canada, saw immigration. I had to hand in my card, my working card, and I went to the gas company again, and they said, we're not taking anybody on. But, he said, we could give you some work if you wanted to start up on your own. I said, well, what does that entail? Well, he said, you've got so many thousand in the bank, insurance and all that. I said, I've got no money. I said, I got a wife and 3 kids in England.
Yeah.
Trying to sell a house. I said, I've got no money. So he said, I'll give you a list of all the people that you know that's left working on their own. So the first guy I rang, I think it was Faulkner, his name was. He said, what are you doing back here then? I said, I'm looking for a job. Yeah, he said, I got a job for you. He said, have you got transport? I said, no, I haven't. He said, well, you'll have to get a car. Oh, he said, I'll see you bottom of Queen Street in King. I said, in the cafe. So I met him then. And he said, he said, get a car. He said, and what would happen is, he said, you work for yourself, pay your own tax and everything. And if there's a $10 job, we might give you 6, and I would have the rest, because it was him that was putting up the money, the insurance and everything else. So I worked for myself in a roundabout way.
Yeah. Subcontracted.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that was, but then, of course, I went to the first car lot. It was a German Volkswagen, little
Bug.
bug.
Beetle. Yeah.
And I said, you know, I'm interested in that. I can give you so much. And he said, you got no collateral. I had nothing, because when I went there with Margaret in the first place in Canada, I didn't buy anything on the HP, on
Oh, you had no credit rating?
no credit rating.
Yes, they said, well, we don't know whether you're capable of paying this back.
That was a big mistake, and that has changed my life. Really.
In what way?
In getting money to buy things. I wouldn't buy half a dozen things, but I would buy things on, you know, so much a week. And so, luckily, our friends Ray and Dorothy in Toronto sponsored me, and so that's how I got my first car.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went working, and then we was making arrangements then for Margaret to sell the house in England, and I think she was having trouble doing that. And then I sold that car and got another car, because she was coming out, and I got a big black. Well, it was a black car with red upholstery.
Big American car?
Yeah.
Chevy?
Something like that. It was what we call them, you had seats, then you had a back. Where I could put my tools.
Oh, like a truck.
It wasn't
a ute in Australia. They call it a ute in Australia. I don't know what you call it elsewhere.
Yeah.
I know what you mean. It's like a cabin, and then it's got a flat bed at the back, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
was the cabin just 2 seats, or was it four? Was it
no
front and back?
It was
big.
Yes, it was a big car. Seats in the front. Yeah, because we used to go out, and if we went out anywhere, then of course I put some money on a house. They were building where Dorothy lived. They were building new houses, a bungalow. So I put some money on the house, thinking that Margaret would sell the house in this country, but she didn't sell it in time. So I lost some money there. So Dorothy phoned up the council, and then we stayed in a block of flats with kind of a council run place. Well, we were 3 stories up, and when you let the twins out, you know, to play with Paul, you were looking down, and you couldn't do much about it 3 stories up, and you couldn't keep them in all the time because they wanted to go out and play. So we said, right, we'll move into town a bit and rent another house. So we rented another private house with an underground garage. So you drove into the underground garage, there were steps there, you went up steps right to your front door, and that was it. All in the heat and the warmth.
Very nice.
Yeah. And that was it, until Margaret then decided eventually that she'd like to come home. So I jumped in the car, took her up to Montreal, and she got the boat and come back with the kids.
Why did she take the boat when you'd been flying back and flying there and things like that?
I think...
Was it just price, or...?
I think it must have been price. Yeah. Because when I went back, I flew. Yeah. And that was it, really. Yeah.
you came back to the UK, and it was a very different place than Canada, Grandma. says.
It was. Yes, it was a different. You know, it was chalk and cheese. It's unbelievable. You know, when we first went there, we saw our first supermarket, and you know, you could go in and buy 200 cigarettes at a time, and oh, geez, you know, and it was just well, there we are, from Adar, England, you know, to a different world altogether. But I still think now that this is the best country in the world. There we are.
What makes you think that?
The culture, I was going to say people, but I don't know.
Manners.
In a way, steadfast and I don't know. But again, we've come out of Europe, and we're coming out, I think, and I was against that. We should stay in Europe, and there we are. But, yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
Sorry?
I said we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
So you came back to England, and you've got 3 young children.
Yeah.
You moved back to Bristol.
Yeah. Well, we moved back in any case to Bristol.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we joined the woodcraft work again. And we went camping with them again. And then somebody said about, could you start a group? So we put adverts around, and you know, first night we had about 30 kids there.
Wow.
You know.
Was that a lot?
Oh, it was really, yeah. But they dwindle off after a while, so you get then the nucleus of about, you know,
The core group,
yeah, a proper group. And we used to teach singing, dancing, and go camping and hiking and all kinds of things, you know. And that was it, I suppose, really.
So the kids are at school, Paul and Jane and Claire.
Yeah.
Uncle Paul finishes school
Well, we
around.
put school Paul into a private school. I was a bit against it, really.
Based on the cost, or?
No, I think if you go to a private school, it should be private all the way through. It's like if you go to a hospital and have private treatment, it should be private all the way through. Don't go back to the National Health, the stitches taken out, or go somewhere, you know. That is the way I feel about it. But anyway, he didn't like the school, and we had troubles. Had to go there, see the headmaster, I think, or something like that. And eventually, he just jumped over the wall one day and come home. And that was it.
Was it a boarding school or something, or?
It was a boarding school, but he wasn't boarded. It was
Right, he was a day pupil at a boarding
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
And then he left school to do an apprenticeship?
Yes, when I was at the gas company, I said, why don't you be a gas fitter? To him, he was leaving school. Jobs were a bit scarce, you know, to get. And so...
This would be in the 70s? Late 70s?
So I suppose it would be. Yeah, I'm terrible with...
In the 70s there was a bit of a depression, wasn't there? Fuel
Yeah.
prices and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And so... I went to the gas company, and what my mate, the fitter that ran me through my apprenticeship, he was now in charge of the education in the southwest. And I said, I went to his house because I knew where he lived. I said, yeah, I got a son, you know, can we do anything about where he said, well, right, he said, we will employ 3 more people. So tell your son to come along and that'll be it. And Paul said, I'm not going. I don't want to be the gas cook. So I could have waited. After going through the trouble of seeing him and all this. So anyway, eventually he said he'd like to be a motor mechanic. And I think Margaret said, he's dirty hands and all that. Oh, I like him. So off he went to be a motor mechanic. And he went to Bristol buses. And he was a motor mechanic on big stuff. Big lorries and engines,
buses, yeah.
you know. And he doesn't like, even today, he doesn't like messing around with cars, not really. Being a, you know, he would rather have a chain and get the stuff out and move the, you know, on a bus than he would in the car. Anyway, then I joined Calagas. Then went for an interview down in Southampton, and it was me and this other guy. He come from Swindon, I come from Bristol, and they only wanted one of us. But we must have made a good impression, so they employed both of us. And they said, right, you know, you can both start next Monday or whatever it was, you know. So, but they didn't have any transport for us or tools and things like this. So we went on a course that a salesman would go on. And this was up in London somewhere. So Paul was what, 17? Yeah, he had a car outside. And I said, look, Paul, I said, tax that car and insure it. I said, don't drive it with no insurance and no tax. Oh, he said, oh, that's all right, all right. Middle of the week, I was up in London. Margaret got up next morning, he was gone. He'd gone out, pushed the car down the road, so not to make any noise, and went with his mate up somewhere up in Kingswood or somewhere. And that was it. We didn't see him again. And I said, well, I'm a bit concerned. And Margaret said, well, that's that's it. I'm not having anything more to do with him. That's it. I said, well, I'm going down and see where he works. So I went down and saw the foreman or manager or somebody down there, down the bus station, down Lawrence Hill it was. And I said, I'm Paul Isaac's dad. I said, he's not living at home, but, you know, how is he? Oh, he comes in here, regular, everything. He's good worker, he's doing this, doing that. And I said, can you tell me where he's living? He said, no, he said, I can't tell you that, he said, that's up to him. If he wants to let you know, he said, you know, I'll let you know, but he said, I don't think he wants anybody to know. So that was it.
What did you think then?
Well, I said to Margaret, well, okay, he's 18, he's got a decent job, and that was it. He must be doing all right somewhere. So I was going up Meadow Road one day, up by the bus station, and he was walking there by the side. I stopped. Hey, hello there, I said. What are you doing then? Hello, Dad, he said. I just live around the corner. I said, jump in. I said, I'll take you round. So I took him round. He showed me the house. I went in, and everybody had a room each with one kitchen. I said, how are you managing? He said, all right, yeah, you know. I said, well, if ever you want to come home, man, feel free to come home. So then he said, I joined the TA. Now, I was a bit against people joining the army.
Mm.
I changed my mind on that mind, but at that time. And so he said he joined the TA, and it was at Hawfield. He used to go and having a great time, weekends and so forth. And that was it. And then I don't know why he come back, but he knocked at the door one day, and he come in, and that was it. You know. And then he decided then at a TA camp, he was engaged then to another girl.
Marion.
No, girl before that.
Oh.
He got married to Marion,
Mm.
and he met her in Scarborough. And so he brought her a meal one day, and she was her father was German and her mother was English, and or vice versa. I forget now what it was, but she was tall. She had boots on, and she looked like a German soldier almost. Yeah. But she. Eventually, cut a long story short, we all went to South Wales to the wedding, and she had a crooked stick to walk down. I don't know why that was. And
They were getting married. This was their wedding.
oh
day.
yeah,
I
this was
didn't
their
know
wedding
this. Right.
day,
Okay.
yeah. So we all went to the wedding, and that was it. He's living down there then, and but they never bought any furniture, or they were in a flat. I think whether they were in a flat or whether they were living with the dad or so, I don't know. But what she ever bought was a slow cooker. And so that from then on, he put on weight, and he is the lad that you see today.
Okay.
So
And what about the girls?
what, Jenny Claire?
They left school.
Yeah, they left school. And I think Jane went nursing or something like this, and Claire went something else.
Did Auntie Jane do an apprenticeship at a hairdresser's or something? First?
No, she wanted to.
Wanted to, right?
Yeah, and she used to work Saturdays mornings there or something like this.
Mm.
And even today, look, she cuts people in the family. Yeah.
I thought they both worked in the bank. Was that?
But eventually, then, yeah, they did work in the bank. And your mum, Claire, worked in the international bank, but they never saw anybody. She would talk to people in Hong Kong and make accounts and money, but she would never see customers come into a bank. It wasn't a bank as such.
Mm.
Jane done the other thing. She went into a bank, so she knew she was into, and she was a bit of a shop steward as well, All right, dear.
Still going on?
Still going on.
Why didn't you come in on mine then? You're in on his.
I've
He had work to
some
do.
work to
Oh,
do
did he?
before.
Alright. Ben, come on. Good boy.
So, and then they, well, as I said, worked in the bank, but Claire didn't like it at all. She was in, you had to kind of push buttons to get into the room, and it's all secret and all this jazz. And so she thought she'd like to be a nurse, so she done a training in Frenchy Hospital. And she said she wouldn't stay home here, but she'd sleep in somewhere, because she felt that if she stayed home here on her own, she would be separated from all the other people trying to be a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was it, really. And she made a very good nurse.
So at some point you had some grandkids.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose grandchildren. Well, we used to, when Jane and your dad when they got married, they didn't have very much money. So at that time we had a caravan and we were going abroad at times, and we suggested you come with us, and then this was it really. And I think you were still, because I think you went to an international camp once in the Woodcraft, didn't you?
Well,
Your
I was-
mother
I
ran
was
a
very
group.
young.
Yeah, and Harry
Did you
wouldn't
want-
wear his clothes. He'd just take his clothes off all the time.
Yeah, that's
Mum would put his clothes on him, and he'd run away, take them all off, and you'd see him running around later naked again. You couldn't get him to wear any clothes.
That's it. Didn't she run a group in Woodcraft group, didn't she?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. And that was it really. Yeah.
So we've kind of gone through your life in a kind of fashion, right, from when you were young. And now I've got some specific questions just in general.
Yeah.
Are there any special people from your life that we haven't met?
Special people.
In the past, yeah, people that your favourite people in your life that we never got to meet.
Yes. That one would be Dorothy in Canada. In Canada, yeah.
Grandma's friend from working in
Yeah.
Canada. What was she like?
She was a friend to everybody. She was one of the nicest people I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
Did you keep in touch with her after you left?
Yeah.
Canada?
Yeah, Margaret used to write and so forth. And then we went back. We did say when we went around the States, we went into Florida, into Disneyland. Remember that I said we went around the States? And we said that if ever we had children, we would bring them back to Disneyland there, But by this time, Paul had left home. Your mother was 16 each, and so we only took Jane and Claire back to Canada to see Dorothy, and that was 1980, because the next year she died of cancer.
Wow. So that was, it's lucky that you got there and saw that last time then.
Yeah. I can't think of anybody else really that has made an impression on no. Friends, yeah, okay, but woodcrafters,
Yeah.
But good friends, but nobody really special that stands out.
When you were younger, the sort of things that mattered to you the most, what did you think was important when you were younger? When you were, say, our age or younger than us? And has that changed when you've got older?
I was always interested in politics. When, from a young age, I used to go up the downs with my mother and father on a Saturday or Sunday, and they used to have what they call Speaker's Corner. And people would get on a platform and say, I believe in God, and somebody say, no, I don't, and a big argument about this and that and the other thing, and it was great. I've always, since those days, I enjoy arguing politics with people. Yeah.
And so that hasn't changed. That mattered to you then, and it still matters to you now.
It does, yeah. Meeting people, I like meeting people, but I like to meet people under my conditions.
What are those?
In as much as if I want to say hello to anybody, I'll say hello to somebody. I don't want saying, well, I've got to go in and say hello to him because he's come, you know. I prefer.
But you choose who you say hello to.
Yeah, in lots of ways, yeah. Yeah. Well, when I used to go square dancing, everybody sat around the hall. American square dancers was, and I used to go into the hall, and I would go to people and say hello. Then Joe, all right, hello Mary, and meet people all the way around the hall, and I would do that, but I didn't particularly want them when I sat down, because if I sat down, I wanted to rest. I didn't want to talk to anybody, but this is what I'm trying to say, and I enjoy talking to people now. Yeah.
If you could relive any specific moments in your life, what would they be?
I can't think of any moments in my life that I would like to. I would live my life all over again, from start to finish. Yeah.
That's great.
It's the people I've met, even people that I've asked, I've been on the continent with, meeting people on the continent, asking the way with this German guy, and he gets his car out of the garage and shows us where it's the campsite. Yeah. I think there's more good people than bad in this world. And I think only a minority is bad, really. But the good don't speak out loud enough. Yeah. I disagree with what the government is doing now, and I disagree with us being the fourth richest nation in the world, and people are having to go to food banks. And these are people that are actually working. And we got people in Bristol now in caravans because they cannot get enough money to put down on a house. And I'm also thinking, and when I die, whether I'm leaving this a better place. I don't think I am.
You mean that you haven't had an impact on the world, or do you mean that you don't think the world's a better place than it was before?
I don't think the world, in lots of ways, is a better place. We still have wars. We are now worried about pollution, our waters with fish eating the plastic, getting mixed up with things, and now they just had a thing in Poland about what is the world's going to be like in a few years' time, and I'm thinking that when we only think of the money in this world, and it vanishes and pence in front of people's eyes. And I don't think money is at the be all and end all of everything.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm.
What have been your proudest moments in your life? You can take your time.
I don't know. I think it's having children. Yeah. And having grandchildren as well. Yeah.
You got a lot of joy from that.
Yeah.
What was it like having Paul, your first child?
Well, the trouble was with that because you are trying to earn enough money to live on, and I was lucky because I had a decent job, you know, and I've never been unemployed or anything, and yeah, so you know,
So you
I
didn't
don't
have-
think money is the be and all and end all.
Yeah, but were you saying that you didn't really have a chance to enjoy?
I
having
didn't
Paul
know
and the
because
girls
I was
early on, 'cause
working.
you was-
Yes, I was working. Every job I ever went to, the first thing I would ask, any overtime? I worked for Rob's in the paper department, you know, shaking up sheets of paper, going through machines. And I, you know, worked overtime, you know, on that. And anything to earn extra money. I made a promise to myself that if I married Margaret, she would never go hungry. That was it.
You succeeded
Yeah.
so far. Well done.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Do you have any painful or sad memories?
I suppose I'm going to say when my father died, but I look at life and my mother as well. We got to die. And I've done everything. Well, I had my other brother and, you know, two brothers left, and we've done everything we can with my mother and father. It was a sad time when they died. But it's something that you've got to accept. I don't want to die, but I've got to accept that it's going to happen. End of story. What I'm going to regret is not knowing your kids.
Well, there's still a bit of time. You never know.
Yeah.
How old were you when your parents died?
Well, how old was I? I was working for Caligas. So I left Caligas in '92, retired. And I don't really know.
So you would have been in what, 40s or 50s or something, maybe?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And did your parents know the girls and Paul, or?
Oh yeah,
They
they
did,
knew
yeah.
they knew the twins, because your mother and Jane used to go down and mess around with the fire. When we used to live in Greenbank Avenue, when I was a kid, no sentries of course, but we had a fire like that, and now and again, the kids would come along and poke the fire and, you know, make a little blaze or kinds of things, and my mother said, "Oh, you buggers, leave that fire alone," you know. And my father would take Paul down to his club, the club where I know he's got a surgery, where I go to my surgery, and see him play snooker and billiards and things like this. Yeah. There we are. It's, yeah.
Who have been the most inspiring people in your life?
The most inspiring.
You must have been quite inspired by Grandma to have decided that you had to make that promise to yourself to never let her go hungry. But is there anyone else that you've met that inspired you?
I don't know if that's the right word, inspire.
You can pick a different word if you want.
See, I don't know.
I'll give you another, like a rephrase, I guess. Is there anyone you met that had a profound impact on you and the way you thought about things, or give you a real that's
Yes, it was joining the Woodcraft folk and meeting people in the Woodcraft folk. Yeah, that would be it. The leader of the group I used to go to, he was a CO with my father, and he was,
Is this the chap that was in prison with your
Yeah.
dad that you were saying before?
yeah. Call him Mr. Dowden, his name was, but we called him Shingebus because that was his name, his Woodcraft name.
Okay.
Because anybody in the Woodcraft was encouraged to have a name. Rather than call people sir and things like this, they would say, now I got a name. There's half the population of this people I know call me Tass.
Tass.
Yeah. Now you'll see, if you read these postcards, you'll see Mag and Tass, or Marg and Tass. Now, if I'm walking along the road and somebody says, "Hi, Tass," before I look round, I know that's the Woodcrafter. But, and that was because, really, in the war years, we used to play in the street, football. There was no cars around, of course.
Mhm.
And we all had nicknames. The nicknames I could think of was Chunky May. You always eating bread out in the street. And then there was Pee Wee. And I was Tasso. And when I went to the Woodcraft, John may come with me because I was a mate of his. And he always used to call me Tass. Because everybody in then knew me as Tass. So whenever I went to camp, in fact, people in the Woodcraft didn't know my first name. That was it.
So this leader who was a friend of your dad's and was also a conscientious objector, what was he like?
He was a very independent person. We used to go out on cycle rides with him. And John May and myself used to have our sandwiches, but we didn't want to carry them very, And so we'd say to Shingebus, "Can you put our sandwiches in your bag?" He said, "No." He said, "You've got to sort yourself out." And he always made you sort yourself out in life, And that was it. You had to do your own thing. And I've always been like that myself. I've been always, I would say, sure of myself. It's only now that I'm losing that feeling of being sure of yourself.
Confidence.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I'm not so confident now because I don't know, it's because my chest. I worry sometimes if I'm trying to breathe. I come home the other night from your mum's and I was doing 2 or 3 things at the same time. Put the car up there and doing this and putting that, and I could hardly breathe. And it worried me a bit. And also, I think of things more now. A few years ago, I said to Margaret about going and see the Northern Lights. And she said, "I'm not going there. I don't like the cold, and I don't like it dark, and I don't like boats." I said, in that case, then I'll go on my own. But I made all the arrangements on my own, phoned them out and everything else. But I was nervous about, I think of, well, what happens if I get to so-and-so and the plane's not there? Or what happens if I miss this and it's not there? And things like this. And I always said Margaret to back up, you know. I would never go, I didn't want to go up in lifts because I got caught in a lift once that wouldn't stop. Went up and down,
Really?
a multi-storey car park. I couldn't get out. I was there on my own. I pressed all the buttons, emergency and everything. It still wouldn't stop. And since then, I've had a dislike of lifts.
I think that's fair
I'm not
enough.
surprised.
So there we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had any lucky moments in your life? Things that you think you're particularly lucky with? You said that Uncle Jack missed the boat that he would have been on in South Africa, and that would have been torpedoed.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't think of anything. No. No, I can't think of anything really. I've always enjoyed what I've done. I've enjoyed Caragas. I've enjoyed working on my own. I don't like working with other people. Even today, if I was going to do something, then I'd like to do it myself. You know. But I can't think of anything really.
Mm.
No.
What are your favourite memories? Your highlights?
When Margaret had the twins, she said when she was having them, now she might have jokingly said this, she said if those, she knew she was having twins, she said, and also she lived with, down in South Wales, with
Uncle and Auntie, David and Olive.
yeah, with the son, he was a Mongol,
Yeah.
yeah, and that was my
Peter.
Peter, he was, yeah. And I thought, I hope they're not Mongol, and I hope they are girls and not boys. We had Paul, and I thought, she could leave me.
She couldn't what, sorry?
She could leave me if it was two boys.
Why?
But that's what she said.
Oh.
They better be boys. They better be girls.
Oh, God.
I was lucky then.
Well, okay, you can say I was lucky, but that wouldn't have happened, I don't think.
No.
Because she left us once, weekend. Yeah. We had a big row. And even the twins now would tell you about it. I think she left a note saying goodbye or see you or whatever. And she got in the car and went. I didn't know where she went or who with or what was happening.
Do you two boys want a drink, cup of coffee, or a cup
Oh,
of
yeah, I
tea?
think so.
I'd
That'd be
love a
lovely.
coffee, please, Grandma.
I
Coffee.
would-
Instant coffee.
Tea would be great.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Tea
Hey,
for you.
Tea for me, thanks,
All
Grandma.
right.
And so I didn't know which one. And so the girls were quite, how old, forgetting how old they were. And I was doing some ironing. So to do a sheet on I got it all out all the sheet all over the place to iron the sheet.
To iron it.
Because you don't do it, do you? You've got to fold the sheet up and then iron it. And I thought, well, got to do something with the kids. I said, kids, we'll all go to the pictures. And to this day, you ask them what picture they saw. Tower Inferno. the towering Inferno. About the a place in New York that caught fire, trapping the people upstairs, and they were trying to get out. But you know, this is you look back and you think, well, okay, this is just part of life, really.
She came back
Oh, she
because she's in the kitchen now making us a cup of tea. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've had some good time together. Oh, we've had a few, few arguments in life, I suppose. But don't we all?
Mm.
I would think there was something wrong, and somebody said once, it was a customer I was working for. And he said, do you know, he said, I've never had a cross word with my wife. And I thought, you poor devil. Not a crossword. He must be under the thumb, but not talking to her. It's crazy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Is there anything that you would say to anybody that's not here anymore? Anyone that you've lost? Is there anything that you wish you could have said to them?
Yes. My father, I would have liked to ask him more questions about his life and why he was CO.
Mm.
Because I think he took the hard way out. The easy way was to join the army, and that's it. The hard way is to fight against the current. It's easy to get in the boat and let it drift along.
Mm.
Yeah. And that is about the only regret I got, really. Yeah. But here we are.
Any closing advice for us?
Any
Closing advice for us? Anything you think we should focus on in our lives?
No, I think you're doing everything right at the moment. You see, I can't think of any advice I would give you apart from if you go to another country and work, don't tell those people you're working for or with that you've done it this way in England.
Why
Because
is
they
that?
don't like it. I
Yeah.
tried it in Canada. What? We've done it better than that. Oh, why did you come to Canada then? You see, and they get all uptight. Because there was people in Canada in charge who'd never seen the sea. Never seen the sea, I thought. They said, well, we got a lake. What's the difference? So there we are. And I try now to, well, I do accept everybody I meet. And if I was going for an interview now, I would go in and I would look at people who was interviewing me and thinking, yes, you went on the toilet this morning, you cleaned your teeth, you had a shave, exactly the things I've done. So I don't think that there's anybody in this world better than me. But I do think there's people more intelligent than me and more brainier than me. I treat everybody, I try to, the same. Whether they got money or whether they're sweeping the road, don't make any difference. They're human beings. That's it.
It's great, Grandad. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Grandad.
How long do I
Give her a hand up.
See ya.
Love you, old man.
Yeah. Oh well, let's get this cup of tea.
Now
Oh,
this
thank
is
you, Grandma.
coffee.